Greetings, Tezos Nation. Welcome to another edition of TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons. Joining me today is Primate, founding member of Tez Capital. Tez Capital, for those who might not know, is the grassroots Tezos organization focused on making governance and user tools for the Tezos ecosystem. Primate is joining us today to talk about the Quebec Proposal's implications for Tezos baking and to bring us up to speed on several of the tools that Tez Capital offers. Hi, Primate. Where are you right now, and how is the weather?
Hey, I'm in Orlando, Florida, and it's very nice and sunny outside. A little bit too hot, but the weather's starting to finally get down into the 80s.
So much different than it was there a week ago.
Yeah, yeah. And even this afternoon, it's going to be rainy and stormy for maybe an hour, and then clear skies again.
Okay. To get the ball rolling, can you tell us a bit about your personal background and your journey into the exciting world of blockchain technology?
Sure, yeah. I've been into computers since probably about seventh or eighth grade. I'm a 40-year-old man, so that's quite a few years. I started with computers when there was a new LAN cafe that opened up in my neighborhood. I downloaded the second version, the beta version of Counter-Strike, loaded it up there, and then I just kind of started taking care of their computers. And that grew into an IT career. And as part of that, you listen to a lot of tech stuff. You hear things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, start exploring it. And that's kind of how I got started with crypto. Um, I started with Bitcoin, just kind of holding it, not really doing anything because it didn't seem like, I would affect any change necessarily. At the point that I joined, probably about 2014 or so. Then I jumped on Ethereum after it was already launched and successful. And I kind of wanted to explore the governance aspect of it because that's just kind of an interest of mine to see how decentralized systems are going to coexist with human systems and, checks and balances and all that kind of stuff. But Ethereum, they didn't want to do the on-chain governance, which for me is the promise of blockchain technology, something that is non-negotiable. So right around the time when I was getting kind of disappointed with Ethereum, where it was going as far as scaling goes, and the ungovernance model, as soon as I kind of got a bad vibe from it, I started looking for other projects. And honestly, Tezos was not even on my radar. But as I started getting more active on Twitter and whatnot, I started seeing ads about TZ Libre and something called Dune and whatnot. So I was like, why is everyone so passionate about this thing that's trying to set things right or whatever? So I started researching it. That was about the end of 2019. So at that point, I kind of, read about the history, about the launch, about the lawsuit and whatnot. And I was like, everything kind of makes sense. The technology is there. I feel like the ethos is there. Bad things did happen, but it's kind of the only game in town, at least at that time, that was commensurate with what I was looking for. So I dove right in. I opened my Baking Benjamin's Baker in about March 2020. And then it's been a wild ride since.
And that journey, of course, has led you to becoming a founding member of Tez Capital, as I mentioned off the top, among other things. I introed Tez Capital a little bit off the top there, but for those who might not be familiar just yet, what exactly is Tez Capital and what's its mandate here in the Tezos ecosystem?
Yeah, Tez Capital is something that grew out of a tool called Bake Buddy. When I first joined Tezos, I tried to use Kiln, but one of the specifics of my setup being on a Mac with a virtual machine ended up having USB issues. So I started talking to one of my friends from the Ethereum and the Ethereum fork days because before I quit Ethereum, I tried to do an Ethereum fork, and I realized that when you can count your team on a hand, and uh, it's a fork of something else for a specific use case, it kind of doesn't make sense. I joined Tezos. I started talking to my developer friend V about the baking aspect of it, and as a matter of what he did at the time, he was running node setup services for several blockchains. So he added that to what he was doing. We called it Bake Buddy, and I've been using it ever since. So eventually, we found out that we have some different payment needs as well. That the current tools in the ecosystem were not necessarily doing, or the way we like it. We like to work in Go, so it kind of made sense to start our Tez Pay tool for public bakers to pay their delegators with. So out of that, we just kind of kept adding tools to our ecosystem, like TezGov, where you can vote on proposals, stake, and even submit your own proposals, especially vanity proposals that are not meant to be passed, but just to send a message to bakers. So as things kept growing, and as we got a grant from the Tezos Foundation a couple years ago, we just kind of thought, what would be like, what is their vision for the future, and how do we see that dovetailing with Tezos specifically? So we thought, an independent community grassroots development organization kind of made sense. And we started with baking tools like the ones I mentioned. We also added a GUI to our tools called TezSpeak. We added the Discord notification bot called TezWatch. Um, and basically, we're still mostly working on baker tools in the ecosystem, but we're starting to kind of pivot into user dApps. Specifically, the ecosystem seems to need some analytics for bakers. So that's something that we think is going to be very popular. We already posted a few examples of the kinds of graphs that anybody can look at, especially on TezGov. We're thinking of adding it. So when you're delegating to a baker or staking with a baker, you can kind of see, are they growing? Are they selling? All that kinds of things. And basically, that'll be the start of another service that's going to have us pivot into the user land. And we want to grow that into an analytics portal for the whole ecosystem. People who work in DeFi or NFTs, or all that stuff in a single pane of glass, with a freemium model of monetizing.
Interesting. And what does your role as a founding member of Tez Capital entail? Like, what does your day to day look like?
Mostly, it's just a bunch of tasks like communicating changes, making small dev updates for me, keeping all the software up to date. Documentation is big. I'm starting to make videos. Providing support, obviously, 24/7 is needed for community members. We're big on that. And collaborating with V and our community bakers as far as any initiatives in the ecosystem, find out how we can help, what we can promote, get involved in governance and that sort of a thing. But like you said, that's just one of the irons I have in the fire with Tezos.
Okay. And there are several tools that you mentioned there that are offered by Tez Capital that I'm hoping to get you to explain a little bit today. But let's start out with TezBake. Can you explain what TezBake is and why it's important?
Yeah. So like I said, I started with Kiln, which was a GUI-based baker utility. When we first designed BakeBuddy, it was just a way to take the official packages that are provided by the core developers and put a wrapper around it that would kind of tell you, how's your node doing? Is your ledger healthy? Notify you when it's down, and kind of give you an idea of, how your baker is running, without having to know as much about, how do I get my own logs? How do I set up my own notifications and that kind of a thing?
Mm,
A lot of technical people already know how to do that, and a lot of those people use the built-in packages that core team provides and the binaries. But we wanted something that would still have the powerful nature of the Octez binaries handy, while providing a way to see what's going on with your baker essentially. And that evolved into TezPeak, which is now a GUI front end for TezBake, where you can set up and monitor your baker just the same.
okay. Um, as you mentioned, you're something of a OG Tezos baker yourself. Before we dive too deep into the baking rabbit hole, though, can you give us a condensed version of exactly what Tezos baking is for the uninitiated?
Yeah, sure. So Tezos is special. So we call our block creation and validation baking. And to be a baker essentially means that you set up some sort of a machine, whether it's in your home or on the cloud, and then you provide 6,000 Tez of stake. Or you can provide less, obviously, but in that scenario, you have to talk to external people who can stake with you. So at the end of the day, you have the final 6,000 tests that are needed to stake. So at that point, you set up a software like TezBake or Kiln, or what was the other one? There was another one. It might come back to me, but basically, you set up a machine using a software like that, and then you start testing or validating blocks that other bakers are providing. And then you also create your own blocks. And the way that it is determined who creates the blocks is ahead of time, about a week ahead of time. Everybody knows who's supposed to bake what and who's supposed to attest to what. And for each block, there is a primary baker and then a list of a few dozen backup bakers. And that's how blocks get processed in Tezos. Then on top of that, when you bake on Tezos, you have the option of opening up staking. So by default, when you start baking on Tezos, anybody can delegate to you, but they are not expecting any payment, because if they didn't find you on the public baker list with all the rules established of how they operate, nobody's supposed to expect payments. But the reason why I say that is because a baker can't deny having delegates, even though the baker doesn't have to pay them. What the baker can determine is how much stake external they want to accept into their bakery. For every one Tez that the baker has, they can set up to 5 Tez in external stake that can join them. And that is completely optional, and the baker can set a staking specific fee. And then when a baker wants to become public, they go to the blockchain explorers, the TZKT and TZStats. They announce themselves, they answer a questionnaire, and then they are put on the public baker list, and they're expected to abide by the rules that they set for themselves.
Okay. The Tezos blockchain's most recent upgrade proposal, dubbed the Quebec Proposal, is currently on its way. Can you walk us through the key points of the Quebec proposal as you understand them?
Yeah, the main point of Quebec, I think, is to keep improving the Tezos blockchain as far as, usability. Going from 10-second blocks to 8-second blocks is a good thing to have for people's experience. Then there's obviously a lot of other improvements on the tech side, like there's a better storage backend. And there's a lot of L1 to L2 improvements that things like Etherlink are going to depend on, the L2s that we're working on. And then also, sorry, my phone's ringing. Then also the Quebec proposal was supposed to put a new change to adaptive issuance, which adaptive issuance is basically determining how much Tez is emitted by the amount of stake that is currently on the blockchain, committed to securing the chain. So the Quebec proposal puts a change to adaptive issuance in order to curb the maximum amount of emissions that can be established. At this point, the proposal period for Quebec A, B, and Kenna has passed, and the Kenna proposal is in the exploration phase.
Okay. And how will the Quebec proposal impact the Tezos baking process moving forward?
The baking process pretty much is unchanged. Thankfully, the proposal doesn't have a lot of breaking changes or anything like that. So the tech side is pretty clear. Everyone's computers and signers, whether you're using a ledger with a slow computer, should still do all right when the blocks are lowered from 10 seconds to 8 seconds, especially taking into account the faster file system that the new Octave version brings. The main thing, and I guess the main point of contention with the Quebec proposal is the changing of adaptive issuance. And that is where the Kenna proposal came in, which essentially disabled any changes to adaptive issuance for this specific proposal cycle, allowing for more stake to get on board for large bakers that don't have staking enabled to enable it and get a chance to catch up. And most importantly, for everybody to determine which way specifically we want to lower emissions, whether it's the same curve that was proposed in Quebec, whether we want to change the amount that delegators get paid. The Quebec B proposal had a provision in there that lowered delegator rewards. It also lowered staker rewards, but delegator rewards were lowered further. To give you an idea, baker rewards would drop by about 40%, and delegator rewards would drop by about 70 to 75%.
Okay. You also mentioned a tool called TezWatch, which, as I understand it, is a Tezos portfolio management tool. Can you talk a bit about TezWatch and what users can do with it?
Yeah, and what you mentioned that TezWatch is probably what it's going to be in the future.
Okay.
We don't concern ourselves with DeFi for various reasons. TezWatch currently is a Discord bot that can notify bakers whenever they miss blocks, whenever they transfer funds in and out, and we're planning to expand that to a more complete monitoring system for smart contracts. For example, TezWatch is currently used on the Tezos domains Discord to notify people as far as who's buying new domains, who's voting on proposals, and that sort of thing. Kind of a way to keep your community up to date when it comes to things that happened on the blockchain.
Okay. Um, you're also actively involved with Tezos domains. So can you give us a brief intro to Tezos domains and what it offers to Tezos users?
Yeah, Tezos Domains is an infrastructure service that provides easily readable domains that end in Tez in order to substitute the need to use the TZ1, TZ2, TZ3 long addresses. People have the option of registering their Tez domain and linking their address to it. And then they set up notifications for expiration. And that's kind of what the service does at the moment. It provides the domain name service. It's integrated into most wallets and services on Tezos. And recently we have converted the project to a full DAO. And we are currently voting on our 13th proposal, which has to do with changing the pricing structure of the domains. This proposal will be part of two proposals. The first proposal confirms the intent to change the price. And the second proposal is going to have the specific pricing options that the community finds popular. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with that. I used to serve as the steward of governance. I helped launch the DAO with some help on the constitution and the proposal process. Then I stepped down as steward of governance and became the community manager.
Okay.
We currently have several people in that function working as moderators, social media managers, marketing managers, and so forth. And we're trying to get people excited about domains. In addition to changing the pricing structure, we are also working on proposals that ungate the 1 character and 2 character names using object auctions, and also auctions on the Tezos domains website for the 2 character names.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, I'm excited to say that we are gonna probably, if the proposal passes for it, do a month-long half-off sale, probably in December this year, to see if this way of allowing people to renew and register their domains is popular enough to offset the income that is lost.
Okay. We still have a couple more Tez Capital tools to discuss, but before we get to those, are you ready for the world famous TezTalks lightning round?
Let's do it.
Great. Then it's lightning round time. Remember, there are no wrong answers, and this is just for fun so our viewers can get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Are you a night owl or an early riser?
I'm currently a night owl, but I get used to either one, and I'm gonna transfer to being an early riser soon because the late owl has a lot of downsides when you have children.
It sure does. Exercise or naps?
Both.
Both. Chicken or fish?
Chicken.
Good choice. What's your favorite country to visit for a vacation?
The Czech Republic.
Excellent choice. If you were elected king of the world, what's the first thing you would do?
I would step down.
Okay, fair enough. Too much responsibility. Name one thing you will never do again.
I would never start later than I want to start. So for anything like a project or whatever, start right away.
What's the secret to happiness?
Not comparing yourself to others.
Excellent answer. Do you have any pets?
Yes, I have a dog named Bobby, and he's 11 years old. He's a 12-pound Pomeranian.
Bobby the dog, I like it. And finally, what is your favorite thing to do on a rainy day?
Chess.com.
Okay. Thank you. Those were excellent answers. This concludes the TezTalks lightning round. Let's get back into it. Tez Capital, as you mentioned, is also the team behind TezPeak, an offering I'm afraid is a little bit above my level of technical knowledge. Can you explain TezPeak and what it does in a way that people like me can understand?
Sure, yeah. TezPeak is a way to take all the tools that we offer, or at least a big chunk of them, like TezBake, TezPay, and TezGov, and give users a local GUI to interact with all of them. Essentially, see what your baker is doing, pay your delegators as you need to, and vote on proposals from a single utility that only needs your local system to function.
Okay. Follow-up question, what's a GUI?
A GUI is a graphical user interface. And in this case, what happens is we set up a little web server on your local computer, which you access through your browser. So you're your own server, and essentially you're hosting the whole shebang. So whatever goes down, you're able to do what you need to do.
Thank you very much. The final Tez Capital tool I wanted to get to is TezGov, a Tezos Governance and Baker tool your team describes as a Swiss Army knife. First off, can you explain TezGov's role in helping Tezos users submit their own Tezos protocol proposals?
Yeah, there is a function of TezGov where if the core developers announce an official proposal or another proposal that bakers believe is on the level of injection, they have the option to use the web interface, put in the proposal hash, sign it in their browser, and off it goes. TezGov also has the ability for bakers to input a proposal that is actually just a sentence, like vote for this, or we want to change X and Y and Z and so forth. And this is a good signaling mechanism for bakers that are not necessarily active in the ecosystem as far as reading news and Twitter, but they still look at the governance process. So, it's a way to contact people that are hard to contact, essentially, and to get some consensus essentially, as far as what bakers can do. For example, if something really bad is happening on the chain that a lot of people disagree with, somebody can inject a proposal that says stop doing whatever. And if a bunch of bakers upvote it, so much so that it passes the proposal period with 5% a stake needed to do that, that sends a strong message to the ecosystem that whatever's going on needs to be talked about and discussed. And we also recently added the ability for bakers and stakers to stake and unstake their coins in there as well. And as I mentioned previously, we want to make that into also a baker performance analytics dashboard where you can see not just, is the baker selling their coins or not, but also, are they active in the ecosystem? Where are they active? What are they saying? And furthermore, we also want to give bakers an ability to, using the TezPeak tool, as previously discussed, make polls for their stakers and delegators where they can get the official, stance of whatever their people want. We think that's a good way for people to streamline the process because right now it varies from baker to baker. Some bakers do it, some bakers don't. It's not necessarily expected in the ecosystem for delegators and stakers to contact their baker, but it should be, and we're working on making that easier.
Okay. And you just kind of introed the process and the reasons behind why somebody would want to submit a proposal through TezGov. And you mentioned a little bit earlier, and I was hoping we could circle back on it a little bit. You mentioned Kenna, which I've been calling Queena, but apparently it's Kenna, which makes a lot more sense. But in terms of Kenna, can you dive a little bit deeper into the reasons behind it's your proposal, right? Can you dive a little bit deeper into the reasons behind you submitting it and what exactly it proposes and what you think that will look like moving forward?
Yeah, so when the Quebec proposals were first put forward, I was a Quebec B supporter because I think long term it does make sense to put some limits on emissions. I still have some thoughts about the ability of adaptive issuance to adapt to scenarios where in the faraway future, L2 is very popular and L1 is not as popular to make sure that there is enough emissions there to ensure the security of the network. But basically, the fundamental reason for the counter proposal is we want to give the new adaptive issuance system a few more months to function as intended. The emissions have currently reached about 7.7% and have started to go down. So we have that going for us. We want to see how much more stake we can get on the network in order to secure it before cutting emissions. We want to give big bakers that were kind of late to the party on adaptive issuance and have lost a lot of their influence on the network to discuss ways that are acceptable to them to lower emissions. Because now essentially a lot of big bakers are being asked to lose a lot of their power, whilst other bakers who were earlier to the party, have grown. So while that is unfortunate, it's just the reality of the governance where perhaps making this change at this time, as opposed to 2 to 3 months from now, when people have had more chance to rally around a way to lower emissions that works for everybody. So we don't have another governance period where there's disagreement as far as where we should head. We want to give people more time to communicate what they want to do next, whether it's the exact same thing that was already proposed, or whether we want to do something like maybe at first we simply lower the influence of delegators and then we add a curve, or vice versa. It really depends on how the discussions bear and what the big stakeholders think about it. Um, we always thought that this proposal period would be contentious because of the aforementioned factors. So we thought that injecting the Kenna proposal that essentially gives us the tech improvements without modifying at this time the economics would have the best chance of giving us progress and kind of making consensus. And so far, that has it has pretty much happened, but we have a very large baker that is opposed to it. So at this point, it's kind of 50-50. It is a little bit unlikely that it'll pass the exploration phase, but it doesn't have to fail. I think we can have the best of both worlds by passing Kenna, and then immediately after that, passing the emissions lowering that everybody's excited about once everyone's had a bigger chance to make sure that that passes. Because if currently the exploration period fails, we are going to be back to the proposal period with the same set of options and still no general consensus of what should win. Not the first proposal period, but the exploration and the promotion periods.
Okay. And when you brought Kenna forward, did you use TezGov to do that?
You know I did.
Of course you did. The other feature of TezGov is that it also helps Tezos bakers change their bakers settings. Can you talk a bit about what that process looks like?
Yeah, with the advent of the staking mechanism that goes along with adaptive issuance, it is no longer automatically managed by the consensus protocol. Previously, about 10% of a baker's stake was frozen. So for every one Tez that the baker has staked, they would need nine. They would be able to take 9 Tez in delegations essentially. So that ratio was automatically maintained for the baker. With the advent of adaptive issuance, now bakers, whether they want to add more stake or remove stake, they have to do so manually. And the same is true for stakers. And stakers are essentially functioning in the same role as bakers, except they rely on their baker of choice to actually produce the blocks. And stakers are also liable for an eventuality or a possibility where a baker accidentally, has 2 bakeries running at the same time, or on purpose try to mess with the consensus. If that happens, stakers are liable for their portion of whatever the baker is running. So that is something that everybody has to keep in mind when choosing a baker. The baker, should have a good history and a good activity, because if double baking happens, it is a matter of time when it comes to how much Tez will be lost. So an active baker is obviously preferred for that. And the TezGov portal offers you the ability to stake and unstake. And for bakers, it offers the ability to decide how much stake they want to accept. Every baker has the option of accepting from 1x to 5x their own stake. So for example, if a baker comes and stakes 10,000 Tez, they can set a multiplier of 5x, and then they can onboard 50,000 Tez of external stake.
Okay. So all of that put together, what we have is a pretty long list of Tezos tools that you have been and are involved with. I know that you touched on this a little bit earlier, but what is it about Tezos and its ecosystem that makes you want to dedicate so much of your time and energy to it?
Yeah, this has actually come up a lot before. Like, why are you so excited about this? Who's paying you? That kind of a thing. And really, I think the answer to this question is kind of the key to the puzzle that Tezos is trying to solve as well. Um, as everyone is kind of aware, the crypto projects, ecosystem, and economy right now is very scammy. And, most of the projects out there are, doing things that may make people money. But if you look at them from a perspective of do I trust this chain 10 years in the future? Do I want to be a member of this chain 10 years in the future, given how, the coins are distributed, who makes the decisions, and that sort of a thing. Um, I don't think there are many other projects. Recently, there have been more projects that do what Tezos does for the most part. I think the bear market has separated the cream from the cream. It has not necessarily priced that in any way right now, but you can kind of see like who's trying to build something to last the sands of time, versus who's just trying to do a money play. And
Mm,
while I like money just as much as the next guy, for me, in this respect, the heart wins. I was part of the internet during the early days, or relatively early days. I wasn't necessarily on bulletin boards, but I was on in IRC chats and that sort of a thing in the early days when everyone was trying to raid the IRC servers and take ownership and stuff like that. And then the open source nature of the internet, experience with Red Hat, following the development process, that sort of a thing, the Linux ethos, the general FOSS ethos. I feel like Tezos is one of the few projects that actually embodies it. And that, in addition to other factors like the availability of funding, which is now being, I feel like the use of funding has improved since I came in 2020. So just seeing everything improve, seeing feedback make it to the ears that affect change, makes me very hopeful. At this point, I don't even look at the price anymore. I just look at, is the community healing itself,
mm,
and that'll bring everything else to our success.
okay. And speaking of, building something that's designed to last, I think at this point, it's pretty safe to say that the government governance model here in the Tezos ecosystem is functioning relatively effectively and as intended. How do you see governance models in the blockchain space and here in the Tezos ecosystem changing in the future?
I'm not sure about other blockchains necessarily because I don't. Um, I do surface level stuff on them, but I'm not very involved in governance necessarily there, other than some good ideas like DAO funding and similar things. I think for Tezos specifically, where I see it going is having two governance systems that run simultaneously, one intended for tech improvements and one intended for economics and things like that. It would probably serve us well, in the way of always making sure that the tech keeps moving while the community has time to properly discuss and decide on economics without
Interesting.
affecting the former. And then long term, whenever the Tezos Foundation starts to run low on funds, I see the proposal governance system evolving into something like a ranked choice cafeteria based funding style where, hopefully at that time we have the two governance systems running. So then we can use the one that is used for economics and funding to kind of determine who bakers want to fund, using some sort of a nomination process, maybe on Tezos Agora. Um, I'm kind of working on a draft of how this will work to post on Tezos Agora as an idea now. But basically, the thing that we need to consider the most is funding and how it's going to be accomplished in the future when all the training wheels are taken away.
Okay. Um, as somebody who has been around this technology for a number of years, um, and obviously has people in your life who are not as embedded as you are, what do you think people in general misunderstand the most about this technology and what it represents?
Yeah, I think the biggest hurdle in the way is just impressing on people that blockchain technology can be used for actual real world use cases, where it applies properly. And it's not just a get rich quick scheme where you buy some, some picture with the dog hat, and then you hope it goes up, and then you kind of try to influence other people to get on it so you can sell and, live in a nice country that you've always wanted to live in, go to the pool and not build anything. I don't think that that is serving the ecosystem very well in general. And I am very proud of Tezos for not trying to do a cheap win that would fundamentally compromise things like regulations and whatnot. That at some point there's going to be laws that are more specific to crypto, and they're going to be figured out in different jurisdictions. And we want to make sure that Tezos never falls into any bucket that says, this is a scammy crypto, essentially.
Definitely. What's next for Primate and the Tez Capital team? Do you have any other exciting rollouts or announcements in the works?
Yeah, we're excited to start publishing those graphs for bakers as far as what they do with their income, to give people a better idea of who they want to delegate to, and also start using that same tool to encourage people to spread the stake, as we would display like information like how many bakers are needed to stop a proposal, how many bakers are needed to stop the blockchain, and how many bakers are needed to double spend and things like that. So yeah, I'm excited to get people more decentralized so we can have a better balance of power.
That's what it's all about, right? We could go on all day, but unfortunately we are actually running out of time here. To all our viewers, thanks for watching. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our social media contacts can be found at tezoscommons.org/TezTalks. We'd love to hear from you. Primate, thanks so much for joining us today. It's always awesome to speak to the folks working behind the scenes to develop the tools that this ecosystem needs to continue on its journey toward mass adoption. Is there anything else that you would like to mention or get to before we sign off here?
Yeah, my main message right now is vote Kenna, and then let's lower emissions and let's keep things going. If you have any questions for me, I'm available on Twitter/X at Baking Benjamins and at Tez Capital, TEZ Capital. And I love everybody that's in the ecosystem still.
Perfect. To everyone out there in Tezos land, thanks for joining us on TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons, and our awesome guest has been Primate, founding member of Tez Capital. Now let's get baking.